part of the Humboldt Bay Harbor Working Group. And I'd just like to thank you for all for coming to our 63rd harbor presentation out here. This is 63, and that's within about 7 years. So anyway, it's my pleasure to introduce Lynette Mullen, who is the owner of Projects Delivered. She's presenting today on Nordic Aquafarm's plans to create a land-based fish farm on Harbor District property out here on the peninsula. She's an independent project manager, and she's in business for 12 years, and she's worked with local government entities, nonprofits, and businesses, the whole gamut. And among her clients that I personally know of are the City of Eureka, the County of Humboldt, HSU, REDAC, AEDC, and the list goes on. She's a busy girl, woman. Anyway, I would like to welcome you, welcome Lynette today. Please welcome her.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. If you cannot hear me, I have a couple of plans in the audience to go like this if they can't hear me, but if you can't, please do the same. I want to make sure you can hear me today. So as Marian said, my name is Lynette Mullen. I'm an independent project manager. So actually working with Nordic is only one of the projects I work on. I'm excited to work on this project because I work with a lot of economic development agencies, and I have been in the area for a very long time. And economic development, workforce development, and basically overall community prosperity are very important to me. And Nordic seems like a wonderful opportunity to support those goals. So I've been very excited to be working on this project. So as community liaison, primarily my job is to identify stakeholders and groups that are interested in learning more about the project, people that may have concerns about the project. You know, environmental groups certainly are looking at environmental impacts and that sort of thing, as well they should. And then doing presentations like this when I get the opportunity. So thank you again for the opportunity today. At the end, I'm thinking for the most part, it would be good to save the questions to the end. But if you are like me and you are afraid you will forget your question, then go ahead and ask it. But otherwise, we'll wait to the end just because the presentation may help to answer the questions that you've got. So Nordic Fish Farm. So Nordic is looking at a land-based facility to grow fish in Humboldt County. And part of the question is why? Is this a viable industry? Is this something Humboldt should be interested in? And why are the investors interested in this project? The U.S. population is expected to grow by 60 to 80 million people in the next 3 decades. That is a lot of people. They're going to eat a lot. We do eat a lot. We eat a lot of seafood, and the demand for seafood is growing. So about 90% of the seafood in this country is currently imported. And I had no idea that that was the case. So we are a huge consumer of seafood, but most of that is imported, and then 50% of that, at least 50%, is farmed. So we are already consuming farmed fish, and that's an important thing to know. Our wild fisheries have had some struggles, and so in some ways it's good that we've got this farm product to kind of balance that out, but we'll talk a little bit about what that farming has looked like in the past. So what this means with the population growing, we are importing a lot of our seafood, and the demand for seafood is growing, is that we need to manage and maintain our existing fisheries, wild fisheries as well as domesticated or controlled fisheries. We need to scale up aquaculture because we can't put additional demand on our wild fisheries. We can certainly keep fishing sustainably. We can build and keep that healthy, but we really do need to come up with other ways to meet our demand for seafood and protein in general. And then we need to address the environmental concerns that we have with farmed seafood products using strict environmental standards. So this is what farmed seafood, farmed fish in particular, generally looks like. This is where it comes from. So this is a sea pen. And again, this is was kind of a new technology to me when I started working for Nordic. So basically it's kind of like you think of a cattle pen or something else, but it's in the water. But the movement of the fish is restricted. The feed is basically thrown in. There is no way, because this is open water, to really control what is coming in and what is going out. And you can see how that might be problematic. And I'll show you the facility, the Nordic facility, in a moment, but it is important to note that Nordic Aquafarms, that's what NAF, removes and recycles the nutrients. So they clean the water as it's being used to raise these fish, where you can see that's really not possible to do in a pen. They treat all water coming in and out for pathogens and bacteria. Again, it's kind of open here, so there's no way to really control what the fish are exposed to, nor is it possible to control what the fish are exposing the wild populations to, which is another issue. They have extensive barriers to prevent fish escape. And you may have read up in Washington not long ago, they had a sea pen that was compromised, and farm fish were able to get into the wild population, which can cause many problems. They do not need a Nordic Aquafarms, because it's a controlled facility, does not need to medicate or use chemicals to treat for sea lice, which is something the sea pens apparently, and I don't know much about sea lice, but I know we wouldn't want to eat it. And so even in the farm facilities, they're trying to control that. But because Nordic controls everything, they don't need to use those medications. They develop on private property. So this belongs to all of us. Nordic secures private property on which they raise their fish, and they control it there. And then they source healthy non-GMO ingredients for feed, and that varies in the sea pen industry. And again, because these are open, they really can't control everything those fish are ingesting, or everything that's in the water that may also affect the fish. So there's quite a difference between that, oops, and this. So this is Nordic Aquafarms in I believe this is the Maine, the Norway facility. So as you can see, it is fully contained, fully isolated. Nothing is getting in or out of there that they do not control. And to give you a better idea of what this looks like, so in a lot of ways, it's kind of like an aquarium or a lap pool for fish. The fish are in these round tanks, and I'll show you another schematic that shows kind of from egg to harvest. But basically, as the fish are growing, they are put in these pens. These are what, oh, I have a pointer, hold on. Look at that. So these are wastewater treatment facilities. So basically, each one of these units has its own mechanism for keeping the water clean. That water is filtered continuously as the fish are being raised in it. These can move, and so what they do is, as the fish get, when the fish are small, they like to school, they like it kind of tight, but as the fish get bigger, they can expand these so the fish have more room to optimize the amount of room the fish have. The other thing about this is the fish are able to constantly move around, which is better for the fish. You notice sea pens, right? If you picture fish, how are fish going to be healthier when they're kind of trapped and kind of bumping up against each other, or they're able to move around constantly like this? And I'm still kind of getting used to talking about these fish as like a product, but really when you think about seafood and you think about fish as a product, certainly having fish that are raised like this until they are harvested, where they get the exercise and the movement that they need, is going to lead to a healthier product, a healthier fish, and ultimately a better seafood product in the restaurants or wherever you're consuming seafood. So one of the next questions, why here? Why on the West Coast? So Nordic Aquafarms is looking at two facilities. The first is in permitting right now in Maine. And what they looked at when they looked at the U.S., so they've got facilities in Denmark and Norway, but when they looked at the U.S., they really realized that the two primary markets are on the coast. And so that's what they're looking at. They want a fresh product. They don't want to freeze their fish. And so they want to be within 12 hours driving distance to the markets that they are targeting. There is, I don't know if you've heard, but there is another fish farm that's locating in Florida, and they plan to fly their fish across the country. These guys don't want to. So like I said, they're permitting here in Maine, so they'll serve this area. And then on the West Coast, they really want to serve from Seattle all the way down to Los Angeles, Vegas, San Francisco, Portland. So there's a lot of market, 50 million consumers on the West Coast. And Humboldt County, if you notice, which I had never thought of us this way, but really on the West Coast, we are really centralized for that market. They can get their fish, again, from their facility to the market within 12 hours in a truck. So Nordic is looking at, and most of you guys may be familiar with this, but they are looking at the pulp mill site here, and part of that, it's Harbor District property, it's industrial land, it's a brownfield, which is good and bad. For them in some ways it's kind of bad, but it's good in that we will be thankful if they come in and clean it up, because there's still more work that needs to be done. The Harbor District's done a lot of cleanup out there with the EPA, but there's more to be done. So it's a benefit to us, though they are taking on some responsibility for cleaning up some of that. So it's actually a little bit risky for them. But as you may know, we've got water coming in from the industrial system, we've got fresh water, we've got salt water, and the biggest thing I think that we have that they need is this outfall pipe. And so their discharge is going to be as clean as it can possibly be, but it still needs to be discharged. They are working their facility in Maine, they're permitting to discharge into the bay, and their discharge is cleaner than the water quality in the bay itself, but it's still controversial, right? If a company was going to come in and wanted to discharge into our bay, we would all rightly have concerns. But they are going to use this outfall pipe, which is 1.5 miles out. Still, all their discharge is going to be monitored. Everything's going to be checked to make sure there isn't a negative environmental impact. But it's a really great asset that we have here in Humboldt. Some of the other things that they looked at, so they looked all along the West Coast. They knew they wanted to be here, and they were trying to find the best place. Well, here, like I said, we had clean cold water, the 12-hour transport to 50 million consumers. That's very good infrastructure. We also have academic institutions here already. We've got Humboldt State Universities with the fishery and wildlife and a lot of really strong scientific programs. But we also have College of the Redwoods, and they do a lot of workforce development. And Nordic's looking at needing professionals, fisheries biologists, and that sort of thing, but also other technical and other skills to help run their facility. And so that was a benefit. The other thing is a nice community to live in. They're looking at bringing about 80 people in, or employing about 80. Hopefully a lot of them will come from here. But they want the people to stay, right? If they're going to invest, it's a very special type of facility. There's going to be very individualized training. So once they train people, they want them to stay here. And so that's looking at the community too. Instead of, I mean, we're isolated in some ways, but we have so many resources and so many benefits to living here, and they really appreciated that as well. So this gives you a little better idea of what the finished facility will look like. This is based on the main facility, and so building one is the grow out. So Nordic, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but they raise their fish from egg to harvest and processed fish. So they basically need little baby fish nurseries. So they've got that on site. They, let's see if I go to the grow out modules is where those baby fish start growing. The smolt baby fish, and then they basically stay here, and it takes up to 2 years to grow those fish to market size. So it's a really big long-term investment when they're putting this together. They also do the processing on site. So literally it's from egg until that fish goes to market. Everything is controlled, everything is on site. In Maine, they're looking at developing a visitor center and a fish pond. They are still in discussions with stakeholders and still want to talk about things that they can do. They want to be good community members. They really want to contribute and help strengthen not only our market, but our community. And so there may be an opportunity for maybe a visitor center. They've also been talking to people about the hatcheries to see if there may be something that can be done there. Commercial fishing, is there something to strengthen that industry, because they don't see themselves as competitors. With 90% of seafood currently being imported, that's who they're trying to displace. That's the market that they want, because they won't have to fly their fish in. Their fish would be fresher and would have less of an environmental impact than the fish that's coming in now. Some key facts about the Humboldt project. 100% land-based. Again, everything is contained. Folks worry sometimes about fish escape, contamination, crossbreeding with the wild fish. That literally is not possible. It would, if you picture an aquarium, it would require the fish to get out of your aquarium, walk out the door, find a lake, and jump in. Not going to happen with these fish. It's just not. But people worry about it, and that's fair, and people need to keep asking questions until they feel comfortable with this facility and knowing that that is true. Fully traceable, like I said, and that's very important. From feed, they know exactly what goes into those fish the entire time too, which is also very important. They are looking at, by the time they're done, investing about $400 million here. And I have to admit, even once they'd hired me for the first couple of months, I'm like, really? Here? For it? Really? But yes, I mean, it's a viable industry, it's a growing industry, and really we've got the best location on the West Coast. They're looking at approximately 80 direct jobs and then many secondary jobs and economic benefits, and I'll talk about that in a moment. That we're not only just talking about Nordic coming in and the positive effect they can have, they can be a catalyst for a lot more in our community. The ultimate capacity is 2,700 metric tons a year. 27,000, sorry. 27,000 metric, I mean, that's a lot of fish. I can't even picture how much fish that is. But it's a lot of fish that will be going out of here. And a made in California seafood product, and it's a made in Humboldt seafood product actually, but that's a big deal too. Consumers are getting more particular about the food they eat. They want to know where it comes from, what goes into it, how it's processed, all of that. And Humboldt's already growing a really strong food brand. We're known for anything from hot sauce to beer to you name it. Chocolate. I mean, there's a lot. And our oysters, I mean, there's a lot of seafood that we do already that does very well, and so this would just be another product. So again, land raised, and this is a picture of the fish. It's a beautiful fish. This is not the fish that they would be raising here, but this gives you an idea of the quality of the fish. Sustainable natural diet, no sea lice meds, like I said earlier, no antibiotics, which is really important, and that's again because they control everything coming in and going out of the facility. These fish are isolated. So if you think of like an aquarium and you're totally controlling the environment, that is what they're able to do here. Exercise, lower fat content, and firmer texture, like I said, so you end up with a really high quality fish. So I talked earlier, they've got 80 direct jobs that they're looking at, but there's a lot of other opportunity and benefits, and I just encourage people to think about this, especially if you're involved in economic development or just what's going on in the peninsula or other development here in the community. Of course, upstream is the construction. I mean, this is a big project. Like I said, up to $400 million by the time it's done. Anything from engineers to construction workers to environmental professionals. I mean, there's just a lot of opportunity for a lot of people to benefit as they're building the facility. Feeds even. So something apparently, again, I'm learning, but the fish food market is continuing to evolve. Apparently in the past they've used a lot of fish meal, which actually requires them to harvest fish in order to feed the fish, which doesn't make a lot of sense and doesn't have a very positive environmental impact. One of the things that seems to be growing is insect meal, which is insects, which is more along the lines of the fish's natural diet, and so they're looking at, that's a possibility. They're looking at growing something like that, at maybe using something like that. Algae, there are other opportunities, and there's nothing to stop a business here locally from exploring that or developing something here maybe. The aquaculture production of many species possible, but really the two that they are looking at is either Atlantic salmon or steelhead. They have not made a determination. Part of it depends on the market, part of it depends on the regulatory agencies and what the officials say they are able to produce. And part of it also honestly depends on the community. Atlantic salmon, there's an existing market for that. They would be looking at displacing imports, but there is concern that they would be competing with the commercial fishing industry here. So those are conversations that are still happening because they don't want to do that. They don't want to take the existing market away from our commercial fishermen. They want to add to this industry here in Humboldt County. But then one of the other opportunities is downstream. So they are constantly filtering the water. And if you've paid attention to any of this, fish waste and nutrients, so it'd be the food that the fish don't eat and their waste, they pull that out constantly. That can be dried, it can be used in fertilizer. There's a lot of ways that can actually, it can be used as biofuel, so if you dry it enough, you can actually burn it. So there's a lot of opportunity to use the stuff that's coming out. And then you've got the fish heads and eggs, I think they call it. So the bones and that sort of thing, and that can go in pet food. Fish oil can be extracted from those types of products. So there's a lot of opportunity here in the community to build off what they're doing. And frankly, they're doing a lot of development on the peninsula too, and there's a lot of other businesses that I think will develop from that can capitalize on the infrastructure that's being developed for this particular project. So where are they right now? So in 2019, they've been doing what's called due diligence in the last couple months. It's basically they're interested, everything looks great, looks like we have what we need, what they need, but what does it really mean? If they dig into it, what does it look like? What do they have to deal with? And so the brownfield cleanup, again, the Harbor District's done a lot of work, the EPA's done some work, but there's still some work to be done, and they need to know what they would be taking on if they move forward with this project. Demolition of existing structures, so there's buildings still on site, and part of the lease agreement is they are taking responsibility for taking those buildings down. So really they're doing a lot for us. Fresh and seawater quality, so it's making sure that the quality of our water, I mean, we think of it as very clean and good, but a couple of the issues that have come up, actually the major one is turbidity. So we have a lot of fresh water, right? We're hearing a lot about please come in and take our fresh water so that we maintain our water rights. The problem is, if you can picture the Mad River, especially in the winter, it's very muddy or turbid. That is not appropriate for aquaculture. They cannot use that water. They can't put that water into their tanks. And filtering that water on site is incredibly expensive, actually cost prohibitive. And so they've been in discussions with the water district to figure out what we can do about that. The other thing that is an issue is we have that industrial infrastructure because we used to send so much water to the mills out there, but that infrastructure hasn't been used in years. And so it's going to require some funds just to bring the infrastructure, not only, and that's not even talking about cleaning the water, but really just to make sure that we can get it out there reliably to them, is going to cost close to $3 million. And so those are considerations we need to see, because we can't expect Nordic to come in and pay millions and millions of dollars to fix these things for us. But yet it doesn't mean that we've got the money and can fix it ourselves. So we're looking at other funding opportunities, we're looking at what we can do. And so for folks that may have heard, and it was unfortunate, but there was some publicity, online newspaper in the Times Standard, the headlines were that Nordic was looking for financial incentives to come in. Unfortunately, that was very misleading, because what they are looking for is help in funding these infrastructure improvements so that they can do their operations here. So it's nothing that they would directly benefit from. It's not money that they would ever see or get. It's funding they're looking for to help pay, you know, the 2.5 or 6 million for the infrastructure, the water infrastructure that needs to be done. Or if that water is going to be clean and clarified so they can use it, there's a cost, a very high cost associated with that. Is there ways to get some funding or figure out mechanisms so that we can get that infrastructure in place so that they can even come here? Because right now, as it stands with our systems, we don't have the infrastructure that they need to develop their facility here. So that's the kind of thing that's going on. Tsunami, and this is new to them on the West Coast. Welcome to the West Coast, welcome to California. The tsunami and seismic assessments, because that's going to add costs, and they've got to figure out what that's going to look like. And then the planning of the permitting process. Anybody who's been involved in permitting in California, and especially on the coastline, will have an idea that they have no idea what they're getting into or how long it's going to take or what ultimately it's going to cost. So they've been working to kind of get their head around that, because they are presenting the proposal to their investors, to their board of directors in September. So in a little over a month, they're going back to Norway, and what hopefully they will do is present a compelling enough argument that that board of directors is going to direct them to go into permitting and commit the couple of $1 million that that's going to take over the following 6 months for them to do all the detailed studies and submit those permits And so there's some unknowns still. And the hope, again, is that we can fill enough of those blanks that those investors and that board of directors will feel comfortable in giving them the green light to go forward and start going through the permitting process. And so if that happens, then in the next year, they want offices and permanent staff in Humboldt. They're going to start working on the specific blueprint or layout for their facility, the site civil engineering, CEQA, and submission of permit applications. And they're hoping late next spring or early summer they can be submitting those applications. And then we'll see. So kind of big picture, final due diligence this year. 2020, the application's complete. And then, and I have to admit this, when they started this process, they were saying, oh, well, we'll be ready to start constructing, if we submit the permits in 2020, we'll get them in 2021, and we'll start building this thing. Unfortunately, with all the conversations they've had just with people who have gone through the permitting process and even the permitting agencies and representatives there, I think they're realizing this is a bit optimistic. It's not impossible, but starting in the next couple of years is probably pretty optimistic. But we can cross our fingers that that's how that goes. Once they do get started, though, this is kind of exciting. So after 14 months, they can at least put the eggs in, so they don't need to have everything built out before they can start production. And like I said, it takes about 2 years for those fish to get from eggs to harvest. So the sooner they can get them in, the sooner their investors, frankly, will be able to see some sort of return on the millions and millions of dollars that they're going to be investing in this facility. So that's about all I have for a kind of a formal presentation. If you're interested, I actually forgot my sign-up sheet, but we do have a newsletter that goes out every 6 to 8 weeks, so please let me know if you're interested in receiving that. We do have a local kind of blog website, so you can look there. And you can certainly at any point get in touch with me. And if I can't answer a question, or if you've got a group or individuals that are interested in meeting more directly with Eric, who is the president and founder of the company and now president of our operations here in the US. Marianne is the commercial director, and she's actually out next week. So they've been coming out every 3 to 4 weeks from Maine, which is where they're located now. They've come out from Norway and are now situated here in the US on the East Coast. But they literally want to talk to anybody who's got questions, concerns. They are happy to talk to you and address any of those. And if you've got ideas or a different way of thinking about tackling something, they want to hear about it. So that's what I've got as far as formal presentation goes. I am happy to answer any questions I can. And I've got my paper here. If I can't answer your question, I will find, yes, I've got cards. And if I don't have the answer to your question, I will find out and get back to you. So that's because I'm not a science person. But.
How many trucks per day, per week?
You know, what I heard was about 18 a day. We've explained kind of the restrictions, but because it's shorter routes, they don't anticipate that being a problem. And it's much less than like when the mills and stuff are operating.
Can you repeat the questions?
Oh, yeah. So the question was about how many trucks a day are in and out of here. So it looks like about 18, if I'm remembering that correctly. The other thing that came up in conversations, and I think it took a while for them to understand how isolated we can be here. We can literally lose all our roads. And what Marianne explained is though they are set up to harvest every day and keep that production going, if we do lose our roads for a period of time, they just won't harvest. And so it's not going to compromise their fish. They're not going to lose fish if that happens, as long as it's not, 3-4 weeks, a month sort of thing. Other questions? Yes?
You mentioned that I heard it talk this would be trucked out.
Yes, this will be trucked out.
So is there any chance that they can utilize the harbor for shipping?
They've looked at that a little bit. One of the issues with that, though, is they are strictly land-based. Other than the outflow pipe, they really don't have any connection to the water. And so what they would have to do is load the fish onto something, take it to the harbor, and then maybe, so eventually maybe, I don't know how much analysis of the transportation has been done. So I'm not saying it's impossible, but I know the current plan is trucking. Yes?
Is the plan, is there a plan to buy the property itself eventually, or is it just continuing to lease it?
The plan is to lease it, so they have a lease option right now through this period. If everything goes as planned, What I remember is a 30-year initial lease and then options to renew that lease for 20-year terms.
So, has there been other sites on the peninsula looked at for the same project?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, they have settled on this site. They've been working with the Harbor District. The one thing they are looking at, though, pardon me, part of this project, there's a very high energy requirement. This, as you can imagine, if you had huge fish tanks, it requires a lot of energy, and so they're looking at locating a 20-acre solar park out on the peninsula as well. Thank you very much. And so they're looking at the most appropriate property. That property they may lease, they may purchase that property. They're still working on that.
They're not planning to build a dock?
No, they don't need a dock.
Okay.
So yeah, no plans for Nordic to build a dock, no.
Could you address the budget issue that we read in the paper of 16 to 34 million for the brownfield cleanup?
Actually, the 16 to 34 million was for a clarifier.
Just for the water?
That was just to get them the clean water. So one of the issues, as I mentioned a little bit